Gentlemen, we don't game till nightfall.
But what about Span?
You've played it.
Yes, we played Wingspan, but what about Wormspan?
You've played it too.
Yes, we played Wingspan and Wormspan, but what about Finspan? I don't think he knows about Third Span Spanathon, Jack.
Finspan is the fishy new entry in the continually expanding Spaniverse. Like its wing and worm predecessors, it's a game about placing creatures into 3 different habitats, strengthening the corresponding core production actions you can take, accruing and transmuting resources through varying mechanisms over 4 rounds into points. This particular flavor has a vertical assembly where each action column represents a distance from shore, but are further broken into sections based on depth. Unlike the spans of yore, fish don't have to be placed sequentially or have additive costs for being further in sequence. It's just fish tend to be more restrictive about preferred placement. Fortunately, if things get tight, any fish can be played on top of a smaller one, lending credence to the idiom, always a bigger fish. When a player takes a turn, they either place an action cube on the play a fish section or in each of the 3 columns where the cube descends, giving a reward for each section that has at least 1 fish in it and activating each brown power on a fish along its way. Then, if it's the first time that column has been activated this round, gives a bonus. With the actions being draw cards, lay eggs, and hatching eggs into fry that can be corralled and, like the majestic Mesa Pegasus and Banalish hero of old, band together to make schools worth buco points. The player with the most points shown on fish from end round scoring objectives, eggs, fry, schools, and tucked tummies at the end of the 4 rounds wins. If Wormspan was an effort to add more layers to the formula, then Finspan is the opposite. Kinda. There's an essence of consolidation to the game. Rather than several unique resources, the primary food eaten by the fish to put them into play is other fish, be they discarded cards from hand or overlaying smaller fish on the table, depending on your new Finny Friends cost, and the life cycle of young from eggs, fry, and schools, which can be potential resource costs as well, gives a bit more clear and tactile of an objective to work with. And beyond that, there's no personal goals, it feels less restrictive in the placement of your critters, and there's not as much of an emphasis on sequential combos, which makes it feel simpler. And it is in scope, though it still remains fairly nuanced in execution. My pervasive feelings going into the game were that it would be cool to cover for the channel, but I didn't really need a new third span game on my shelf, and as important to my Alaskan heritage as fish are, dragons and birds are way more my jam. But against expectations, it manages to set itself apart. I really love the emphasis on cards as resources. Not only does it prompt you to seize so many more options in one game, it gives your options an elasticity, able to pivot quickly without restriction from one resource or another, while the different sections and occasional overlaying requirements still make for some tough choices. And the egg to school to fry minigame is honestly super cool. The fact that a lot of fish entering activated and endgame abilities interact with the different stages makes them the real infrastructure you build around. But there's a loneliness too. If multiplayer solitaire is an accusation you'd lay on the prior games, here you're hanging in the nebulous depths. End round points are no longer really a contention. Sure, you have a goal and get bonuses based on it, and the player who has the most gets an extra 3-point snack, but it's not ranked. And discards, when you pay for fish with other fish, it goes into your own personal void, which can be resurrected into your hand through various effects. And while there are plenty of abilities you can activate that benefit all players at the table, there are no when another player does blank actions impacting your choices. Even fish are blindly plucked from a draw deck rather than a display, so there's no pressure to scoop that cockatoo before someone else nabs it. This isolation further simplifies things, which seems to be the goal on hand, but for me is a weakness, breaking the act of playing together further apart. Overall, Finspan is snappy, strategically succulent, and far from just a rehash of the formula, even if I'm still on the fence about the necessity of owning 2, let alone 3. But if you're a dedicated spanner with one or two already in your collection, I'd say try before you buy to see if it's something that you really want to add and gives you a distinctive flavor, particularly a distinctive flavor that you want to invest time and shelf space into. If you're merely span curious, I think this is a really good option, particularly if the theme appeals to you, and it definitely is the most streamlined and polished initial release now that they have more time putting out these ding-dang things, even if my preferences are to have a little bit more latitude and dimension in my games, leading me to prefer the former two. But Finspan is a surprise, and maybe it'll be cold one day, but for now, it has the fit and finish, not to mention the favoritism of my 10-year-old who loves it over Wingspan, to have on hand. And that's our review, but let me know, what is your favorite of the Spanathon and what span do you want to see next? Put it in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, thanks for supporting, thanks for being an awesome community. You know that I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald.
But what about Dino Span, Arithmospan, Span in a Can, Spandex, the Hound of Spandervilles? He knows about those, right?